My son told me at dinner, "You're not even half the woman my mother-in-law is." So I made them homeless in 30 days. His wife had zero idea I was secretly paying their rent the entire time, until I showed her the proof right there at the table. I paid my son's rent for 2 straight years, $2,800 every single month. Then, at dinner, he looked me in the eye and said, "You're not even half the woman my mother-in-law is." So I pulled out my phone, right there at the table, opened my banking app, scrolled past 24 months of transfers, $67,200 total. And I said, "Then tell her mother to cover what she promised in rent." His wife froze. Her fork clattered against the plate. "Rent? What rent? Evan, what is she talking about?" The colour drained from his face. That's when I knew. He'd been lying to her the entire time. She thought they were fine. She thought they'd built this life together. She had no idea her husband was being bankrolled by the woman he'd just insulted. That's when everything shattered. My name is Ruth Carson. I'm 68 years old. I've been a widow for 13 years. For more than 2 decades, I worked the front desk at Providence Hospital. I answered phones. I kept patient charts in order. I learned how to smile even on nights when grief pulled at my ribs. Evan was my purpose, my constant. When he started at Portland State, I took an extra evening shift. The college loans were in his name, but the payments, they landed in mine. I never complained. When he moved into his first tiny apartment in southeast Portland, the deposit was more than he had. I covered it, told him, "Just get on your feet, that's all I need." He nodded back then. Those earnest eyes, promising he'd handle the next one. Years passed, promises softened into silence. 2 years ago, he lost his marketing job. He showed up at my house shaking. "Mom, it's just for a month. I'll pay you back as soon as I find something." I transferred the rent before he finished the sentence. 1 month turned into 3. 3 turned into 9. By the end of the first year, it wasn't even a discussion anymore. I just woke up on the first day of every month and sent the money. Because I loved him. Because he needed it. Because I didn't want him to fall behind. He avoided meeting my eyes when I asked about work. "Kara's family thinks I'm doing fine," he muttered once. "Let's just keep it simple." Keep it simple. Keep quiet. Pretend everything's fine. Love had become obligation. Obligation had become routine. And somewhere along the way, my silence became the foundation he depended on. Too much. Too deeply. But his wife, Kara, she had no idea. She thought they were thriving. She thought Evan was providing. She thought his promotion last year had fixed their finances. There was no promotion. And her mother, Patricia Hale, she walked through life with the confidence of someone who'd never worried about rent or overdue bills. At Evan and Kara's engagement party, Patricia kissed her daughter's cheek and announced, "My daughter always knew how to choose well." During dinner that night, she looked at Evan with pride. "You've built such a stable life already. It shows real discipline." I glanced at him. The down payment on his first condo? That came from overtime hours I worked at the hospital. Evan kept quiet, let the praise wash over him like he'd earned it. Patricia wasn't cruel. She just lived in a world where everything looked effortless, and she assumed Evan came from the same place. "You raised a confident man, Ruth," she'd say, but she never saw the patchwork I'd done behind the scenes. Holidays slowly shifted. Patricia hosted more. Kara chose her mother's traditions over mine. At birthdays, Evan drifted toward the louder, shinier table. I stayed politely at the edge. Piece by piece, I withdrew quietly, letting them take the spotlight so tempers wouldn't flare. And Sunday dinners? Those became performances, Kara lifting her glass with that precise flick of her wrist she learned from her mother. Every few minutes, Patricia's name would float through the conversation like expensive perfume. "Mom says the key to a real family is a woman who holds everything together without complaining." She smiled at Evan. Bright, expectant. That's when he said it. "Well, my mom's not even half the woman your mother is." The words shot out quick and careless. The whole table froze. Even the hum of the refrigerator in the next room felt louder. I set my fork down. Something in me, the part that had bent too far for too long, finally steadied. I pushed my chair back. The wooden legs scraped the floor just enough to make both of them look up at me for the first time that evening. Then tell her mother to come pay your monthly rent. Cara blinked hard. Rent? What rent? Evan's face drained of colour. In that instant, the first fault line appeared. Thin but sharp. I folded my napkin, placed it beside my plate, let the silence gather its weight between us. These, I said, turning my phone screen toward Cara, show the transfers I've made every month, covering what he couldn't manage since losing his job 2 years ago. Cara jerked back. 2 years? Evan finally spoke, voice weak. Cara, I was going to tell you. I just needed time. Time for what? She shot back. To pretend you're providing for us when your mother is doing it, he flinched. I was trying to protect you. By lying to me. She shook her head, breathing fast. Is anything you've said about our life real? Evan sank onto the couch. I didn't want you to think I'm a failure. Cara turned to me, her eyes sharp with confusion and fear. And you? You knew all this time? I didn't know she believed something else, I said gently. I never meant to embarrass anyone, but I won't hide the truth anymore. I slid the lease from my bag. My name sat clearly under the word guarantor. I co-signed the lease as guarantor at his request. That's all I agreed to. Nothing more. Cara stared at the page like it burned her fingers. I thought we built this together, she whispered to Evan. Turns out your mother built it, and you let me believe otherwise. Evan covered his face with his hands. Please, not tonight. That's right, I said softly. Not tonight, because I'm not discussing anything more. I won't raise my voice and I won't defend myself. The apartment went still, the kind of silence that makes every breath louder. I left before the first real argument exploded, but the hallway walls were thin. Their voices followed me all the way to the elevator. 2 years, Evan. 2 years your mother has been paying our rent. Cara's voice was sharp enough to cut through plaster. I told you I'd fix it, Evan shouted back. I just needed a chance. You needed honesty. The elevator doors closed, but their words wedged themselves into the cracks of my ribs. By the time I reached the parking lot, another argument rose above the others, neighbors opening doors, someone muttering, "Not again." The sound of footsteps pacing across their ceiling. I drove home in silence, hands tight on the wheel. The night air outside was cold, but inside me, something old and worn was warming, like a long, frozen muscle waking. I had held Evan up for so many years that I never stopped to see how heavy he had become. Every emergency, every bill, every quiet panic. My hands had caught them before they hit the ground. At home, I set my keys down and stood in my small kitchen, the kind of place where everything had a scratch or a dent, but nothing pretended to be perfect. I looked around and felt the weight of decades crash through me. I had supported him through college, through that first failed job, through the layoffs, through every moment he whispered, "Just until I'm stable." Stability had become a story he told me to keep my wallet open. I picked up my phone. My fingers shook for only a second. I'm ending the rent help in 30 days. I'll stay guarantor until then, but you both need to prepare. This isn't punishment. It's the boundary I should have set years ago. I love you. I read the message once, then sent it. The reply came from Evan at dawn. Mom, please don't do this. We can't handle this right now. I'm trying. I swear I'm trying. Just give me more time, please. 3 more messages followed, each shorter, each more desperate. Cara sent nothing. By mid-morning, my phone was quiet, the kind of quiet that lets truth settle in without apology. I put the phone face down on the table, let myself breathe without carrying their weight. For the first time in years, I wasn't rushing to fix something. I wasn't transferring money, I wasn't soothing panic or absorbing blame. I was just sitting in my kitchen, drinking coffee, watching sunlight crawl across the floor. and it felt like coming up for air after being underwater for decades. But the peace didn't last long. 2 days later, Patricia showed up without calling. I heard the sharp knock before I even reached the hallway, the kind that carries judgment in the rhythm. When I opened the door, she stood there in a tailored coat, chin lifted, bracing for battle. "Ruth," she said tightly, "we need to talk." I stepped aside. "Come in." She didn't sit. "Cara is devastated. She says you blindsided them. If there was a problem, you should have come to me instead of humiliating them." I met her eyes. Humiliation wasn't my goal. "Then what was it?" She folded her arms. "Because right now, my daughter is crying in my kitchen, and Evan can't even give her a straight answer." "He hasn't given anyone a straight answer in a long time," I said softly. That made her blink. Just once, but enough. I picked up the file I'd set aside earlier, the one with bank transfers and screenshots. "This is what's been happening." I handed it to her. "Rent payments, every month, for 2 years. She flipped through the pages slowly, lips tightening as she read. "Cara had no idea," she murmured. "I didn't either," I said. "Not until that night. I thought she knew." Patricia sank into the chair at my table, the fight draining from her shoulders. "Evan told us he was covering everything. He said his promotion last year fixed their finances." "There was no promotion." She closed her eyes for a moment. "My daughter trusted him completely." "I understand," I said. "I trusted him too." Her voice lowered. "Cara isn't cruel. She's proud, and she hides fear behind it. If she knew Evan was struggling, she would have helped, or insisted I help." "She didn't know," I said gently. "She was living in the story he built." Patricia opened her eyes again. This time there was no arrogance, just a tired mother staring at a truth she didn't want to face. "We both raised them," she said quietly, "but only one of them hid the truth." The house fell into a fragile silence, the kind that sits between two mothers who finally see the whole picture and can't put it back together the way it was. Patricia stood slowly. "I'll talk to Cara. She needs to understand what happened here, what he did to both of you." I nodded. "Thank you." At the door, she paused. "Ruth, I'm sorry for how my daughter spoke to you, for how I might have made you feel invisible." "You didn't know," I said, "but I should have looked." 3 days later, we all sat in the rental office. The room felt too quiet, the kind of quiet that comes before something breaks. Evan sat on one end of the small table, shoulders curled inward. Cara sat stiffly beside him, jaw tight, hands clasped so hard her knuckles paled. Patricia stood behind them, one hand on her daughter's shoulder. I took the chair across from the landlord. He cleared his throat. "Thank you all for coming. I'll get straight to the point." Cara leaned forward. "We just need to update the paperwork, that's all." The landlord folded his hands. "Without Mrs. Carson listed as guarantor, you don't meet the income requirements for this unit." Evan looked up quickly. "I make enough?" "You don't." The landlord interrupted gently. "Not for this building. Not for the rent amount. Not even with both incomes combined." Cara stared at him. "There must be a mistake." "There isn't," he said. "Mrs. Carson's name is what allowed the approval 2 years ago. Without her, you'll need to vacate or reapply for a different unit." Silence slammed into the room. Cara turned on Evan. "You told me we were fine." "I was trying to fix it," Evan said, voice cracking. "I thought I'd get another promotion. I didn't expect the truth," she snapped. Patricia squeezed her daughter's shoulder. "Cara, let him speak." But Evan couldn't. His hands shook too hard. I steadied my voice. "This isn't meant to destroy anything. I'm ending the help because I should have ended it years ago." Evan's head snapped toward me. "Mum, please don't do this. Please, just give me a few more months." "You've had years," I said softly. Cara let out a harsh breath. "So what now? We're homeless?" "No," Patricia said quickly. "You can stay with me until you figure things out." Evan closed his eyes. humiliation flickering across his face. "I don't want that." "It's either that," the landlord said gently, "or a smaller unit, but this one isn't possible." Cara pressed a hand to her forehead. "We built our life here." "You built it on a story," I said. "And stories fall apart when no one tells the truth." Evan's voice broke. "Mum, I can't lose everything." "You're not losing everything," I said, leaning forward, "but you're going to stand on your own feet. I love you, but I'm done raising you." Cara wiped her eyes. Evan slumped back in his chair. Patricia looked between all of us, the lines on her face deepening. The landlord gathered his papers quietly. "You have 30 days to decide." Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The consequences had finally arrived, sitting heavy in the middle of the room, waiting to see what they would do next. Evan's first message came before sunrise the next day. "Mum, please answer. I'm falling apart here." The second one arrived minutes later. "I know I messed up. Just don't abandon me." Each text landed like a stone in my chest. I held the phone, staring at his words until they blurred. I didn't reply. Every instinct I had, every reflex I'd built over decades, wanted to soothe, to fix, to rush in. But I didn't. By noon, 7 more messages had arrived. "We're looking at apartments today. Everything's so small." Cara won't even talk to me. Patricia keeps asking me why I lied. "Mum, please, just 1 more month." At 10 o'clock that morning, I sat across from Dr. Harron in her quiet office. She'd been my therapist for 6 months. Ever since I realized I was drowning in my own kindness, she watched me with that steady patience that always made me feel seen. "You look exhausted," she said. "I'm grieving," I whispered. "It feels like I cut off my own arm." Her voice softened. "You didn't cut anything off, you stopped bleeding out." I let out a shaky breath. "I don't know who I am if I'm not holding everything together." "That's the work," she said. "You've spent your whole life overgiving. Now you're learning to choose yourself." She leaned forward. "Ruth, do you know what enabling looks like?" "I think so. It looks like love. That's why it's so dangerous." When I got home, a new message waited. This one from Cara. "I'm angry, but I also get why you snapped. I'm trying to process." 5 minutes later, another. "I shouldn't have compared you to my mom. I'm ashamed." I sat down slowly. Cara's words weren't an apology, but they weren't an attack either. They were something in between, a crack in the armor she'd been wearing. That evening, Patricia called. "Evan's staying with me for now," she said gently. "The marriage is strained." I closed my eyes. "I'm staying firm." "I know," she replied, "and I think that's exactly what he needs." After we hung up, the house felt heavy but peaceful. The messages kept coming, but I didn't rush toward them. For the first time in a long time, I let them sit unanswered. The first 2 weeks were brutal. Evan texted every morning, every night, sometimes in the middle of the afternoon when panic must have grabbed him by the throat. "I can't do this without you. Cara's parents are treating me like a child. I hate myself for what I said to you." Every message was a test, a rope thrown across the gap, hoping I'd grab it and pull him back to safety. But I didn't. I went to therapy. I went to the grocery store. I started walking in the mornings before the sun came up. Just me and the quiet streets and the rhythm of my own breath. I wasn't ignoring him. I was learning to let him sit with his choices. By week 3, the messages slowed, became shorter, less desperate. "Found a new apartment. It's smaller, but we can afford it." "Starting a new job next week. Sales. It's a pay cut, but it's something." Cara and I are in counselling. 3 months slipped by. Not quietly, but steadily. Like a river finally choosing its right path. My days had taken on a new rhythm, one that didn't revolve around Evan's emergencies or Cara's expectations. On Tuesday mornings, I joined the senior hiking group in Forest Park. The first time I showed up, a woman named Marjorie raised an eyebrow. "You knew?" "New to choosing myself," I said, adjusting my backpack. She laughed. "Then you're in the right crowd." I found calm in the steady pace of each trail. In conversations that weren't about problems at home, no one needed anything from me except my company. On Thursdays, I volunteered at the literacy program downtown. A young mother named Alina pulled me aside once. "You explain things in a way that makes me feel smart," she said shyly. I smiled. "That's because you are." She blinked fast, like no one had ever said that to her before. Those moments, the ones where I wasn't fixing or rescuing or bleeding myself dry, those were the ones that started to fill the hollow places inside me. Evan and I kept contact simple, short calls, occasional lunch, no requests for money, no whispered panic. He lived with Patricia's support now, and their conversations were cautious but improving. One afternoon, over coffee at a neutral cafe, he cleared his throat. "Mum, I'm sorry for what I said that night." I set my mug down. "Words cut, but healing doesn't rush." He nodded, accepting the boundary instead of arguing with it. Cara reached out a week later. Her message was brief. "Can we meet? Just us." We sat on a bench in Laurelhurst Park. She didn't look at me at first, just stared at the ducks on the pond. "I understand now," she said quietly. "You carried more than I ever saw." I believed her. Not entirely, but enough. "I was raised to believe that needing help meant failure," she continued. "My mum taught me that strong people handle everything alone. So when Evan struggled, I think part of me just didn't want to see it." "You were living in the version of him he wanted you to see," I said. She nodded. "And I liked that version. It was easier." We sat in silence for a moment. "I'm not asking you to help us again," she said. "I just wanted you to know I see what you did, and I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner." My grandchildren came by twice a month now. Structured visits, healthy boundaries. I started small savings accounts for them. Bought them books, taught them how to plant herbs in little clay pots on my windowsill. Support that belonged to them, not their parents' lifestyle. One afternoon, my youngest granddaughter looked up at me. "Grandma, why do you live alone?" "Because I learned that being alone and being lonely are different things," I said. She thought about that. "Are you lonely?" "Not anymore." And I meant it. The more I built this life, the one that belonged only to me, the more I realized something important. Being compared to another woman had never been the real wound. The real wound was how easily I'd let myself shrink over the years. How I'd made myself smaller and quieter and more convenient so everyone else could feel bigger. How I'd turned love into a transaction where I gave everything and asked for nothing. How I'd confused sacrifice with strength. But now I stood whole. I looked at the framed photos on my mantle. Evan as a boy. Evan at graduation. Evan on his wedding day. I loved him. I would always love him. But I didn't owe him my life anymore. 4 months after that dinner, Evan called. "Mom, Cara and I signed a lease, a 2-bedroom in Beaverton. We can actually afford it on our own." Pride flickered in his voice. Real pride. The kind you earn. "That's good, sweetheart. It's not as nice as the old place, but it's ours. That matters more." We met for coffee the next week. He looked different. Thinner, more tired. But there was something in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Accountability. "I've been thinking about what you said," he started. "About standing on my own feet." I waited. "I don't think I ever really did that. Even before I lost my job, I was always leaning on you, and I told myself it was temporary, but it never was." "No," I agreed. "It wasn't. I'm trying now. Really trying. I got promoted at the new job. It's only an extra $200 a month, but it's something. And Cara and I are splitting everything 50-50. No secrets." "That's what partnership looks like," I said. He stared into his coffee. "Do you think you'll ever forgive me for what I said?" I thought about that for a moment. "I forgive you for the words," I said, "but I won't forget what they revealed. You were willing to diminish me to protect your ego. That's not something that heals fast." He nodded slowly. "I understand, but I'm proud of you for doing this work now, for standing up, for telling the truth." His eyes watered. "I love you, Mom." "I love you too," but love doesn't mean rescue, not anymore. We finished our coffee in comfortable silence, and when we left, we hugged. It wasn't the same as before. There was distance now, caution, but there was also respect. And respect, I'd learned, was worth more than being needed. Patricia invited me to tea at her house a week later. It was strange sitting in her pristine living room, the place where Evan and Cara had spent so many holidays while I stayed home alone. "I owe you an apology," she said, pouring Earl Grey into delicate china cups. "For what?" "For not seeing, for assuming, for letting my daughter treat you like you were less than." I accepted the cup. "You didn't know the full story, but I should have asked." She met my eyes. "I made assumptions about you, about your life. I thought because you worked at a hospital and lived modestly that you were simple, uncomplicated." "I am uncomplicated," I said, "but that doesn't mean I'm small." She smiled sadly. "No, it doesn't." We talked for 2 hours about motherhood, about the impossible standards we set for ourselves, about the ways we'd both failed and the ways we'd both tried. When I left, she hugged me at the door. "You're stronger than I gave you credit for," she said. "I'm stronger than I gave myself credit for." That night, I wrote in my journal, something Dr. Harron had encouraged me to do. Today, I realized I'm not angry anymore. Not at Evan, not at Cara, not even at myself for taking so long to wake up. I'm just grateful. Grateful that I stopped, that I chose myself, that I set the boundary before I completely disappeared. People think boundaries are about building walls, but they're not. They're about building a foundation strong enough to hold your own weight. For years, I held everyone else up. And I was so focused on their balance that I forgot to check my own. But now I'm standing, really standing, on my own 2 feet. And it feels like breathing after decades of holding my breath. 6 months after that dinner, my life looked completely different. I wasn't waiting by the phone anymore. I wasn't checking my bank account with dread. I wasn't losing sleep over someone else's crisis. I was hiking 3 times a week. I'd lost 15 pounds without trying. My blood pressure dropped. My doctor said I looked 10 years younger. I started taking a watercolor class on Saturday mornings. I was terrible at it, but I didn't care. It was mine. I made friends who didn't know me as Evan's mum or the woman who worked at the hospital. They just knew me as Ruth. And Ruth was enough. On Sundays, I cooked meals I actually wanted to eat, not the things Evan liked or the recipes Patricia praised, just food that made me happy. Small pleasures, quiet joys, the kind of life I'd forgotten I deserved. We had a family dinner 7 months after everything broke open. This time it was at my house, my rules, my table. Evan and Cara arrived on time. They brought flowers. A small gesture, but it mattered. Patricia came too. She offered to bring her famous roast, but I politely declined. "I've got the menu covered," I said. We sat around my small dining table, the one that had always felt too big for just me. Conversation was careful at first, polite. But then Cara asked about my hiking group, and I told them about the trail we'd done last week. 6 miles, steep elevation. "I didn't know you could do that," Evan said, genuine surprise in his voice. "Neither did I admitted. But I wanted to find out." Patricia smiled. "Ruth, you're glowing." And for the first time in years, I felt it. Not the glow of self-sacrifice, but the glow of self-possession. After dinner, Evan helped me wash dishes. Just the 2 of us in the kitchen. "Things are better," he said quietly. "Between Cara and me. The counselling helped, but mostly not having secrets helped. Good. I'm paying off debt now, slowly. But it's happening. I'm proud of you." He dried a plate carefully. "Do you think we'll ever go back to how we were before?" I paused, hands in the soapy water. "No, but I don't think we should." He looked at me. "Before, I was drowning trying to save you," I continued. "Now we're both standing. It's not the same, but it's healthier." He nodded. "I miss the old version of us sometimes."